Hello, ladies and gentlemen. This is your host, Ash, and today I want to talk to you about a very important topic. Some of you have been wondering, how do we create our watch list? So, how do we pick stocks? How do we know which ones are going to run and which ones won't? And we'll be making a video series about how to create your own watch list where you won't need anyone. You will have your own watch list and your own plays, right? This is the dream. This is what everyone wants. You don't want to be reliant on anyone. I'm sure even us included, you want to have your own plays and your own picks. So this is not something that can be covered in one or two or even three videos. So this is why I thought we'd come up with the idea of creating a whole video series that covers everything when it comes to buying penny stocks and OTC. And for this particular one, I'm gonna cover how we identify Reddit squeezes, right? Or penny stock squeezes. Short squeezes have been very popular since the AMC and GME days, and they've never really died down since then. And of course, one of our latest winners, Redbox RDBX, we call this one very early and it ran almost 700% plus. Among others, we called SFT early, we called Mullen early, we called Apron early, we called EVFM early. So the whole idea is, and what we're going for here, is how can you guys identify what has the potential to be a short squeeze and what's just gonna get kicked to the sideways. So actually there's a criteria here. And more importantly, is it too late for you to get in? Because we see this happen a lot, especially with short squeezes. We see a run up and then we see the stock dies and then we see an even bigger run up. And this is very confusing for even the most seasoned traders. You don't know when to take profits, right? It can get very confusing. So believe it or not, the way we figure out how to find out these short squeezes is actually more science than it is art. And of course, as with everything in trading, of course, experience plays a huge part here, but still, there are certain things that you can follow that will take a lot of the guesswork out of it. Alright, so without further ado, let's get started. But before we get into the list, make sure that you follow our alerts room, link down in the description below. If you guys have not followed it, you're missing out. We post a daily watch list, entries, exits, all that cool stuff. We post multiple times during the market hours, answer all your questions, hang out there all the time. I'm sure you guys would love it. Please subscribe to this channel and like this video if you haven't already. A lot of effort goes into the stuff, and this kind of tells us what stuff you guys like and what stuff you guys don't. So let's jump into it. First things first, where do we find these short squeeze plays? And for me, I have three main subreddits that I look into. So subreddit number one is obviously short squeeze. Now r/short squeeze is the biggest and most popular subreddit for short squeezes and short squeeze plays. A lot of them originate over there and then they find their way among others. We also have r/squeeze plays, and we have finally the smallest but not least important one squeeze DD. Now you want to be scouring these daily, right? You want to see shifts in trend. If you see a stock being mentioned multiple times, if you see a particular post with a lot of comments and people saying that they're buying or they're going to buy, these are all very good indicators. Not good enough on their own, but this is how I know that this is something I need to look further into. And so far, these things have been very good indicators in my own personal opinion. First things first is I go through the fundamentals. Now, let's be frank here. The fundamentals are not very important when it comes to a short squeeze. That doesn't mean it's not important when it comes to a company. If you're holding long term, that's a whole different thing. But we're talking specifically here about a short squeeze. Our aim is to identify a stock that will get squeezed and will force the shorts to cover. This has nothing to do with the fundamentals of the company. Not directly anyway. Of course, once there are more eyeballs on the stock, and if people actually genuinely find that this is a particularly good company that's undervalued and has great fundamentals, you will get extra buying pressure. You'll get people who will buy the stock and hold it longer, and increases the buying pressure and increases the pressure on the shorts to cover, right? So indirectly, fundamentals are important, but this is not the key thing I would look at here. You can argue all you want that the fundamentals are important and you can't have a short squeeze without them, but if we're being realistic here, if we're being real here, if we are looking for a specific short squeeze play nothing less and nothing more, then fundamentals are something I would definitely look into, but this is not the main criteria for me. Now the next part, which is the upcoming catalysts, this is where I spend most of my time. This is ridiculously important. This is very, very important. Here I look for future catalysts. I look for things that people can rally around. People can have a particular date for something to happen. Let's say, for example, earnings, right? So for example, Aprin, APRN. So Aprin has earnings in August. If people feel that the earnings will be very good, the numbers will be very good, guidance will be great, then when that happens, people can rally around this particular catalyst, right? That's a forward-looking catalyst, something that will happen in the future. And they can all start buying in anticipation that this particular thing will help make the stock go higher. So you need something that will happen in the future, a future catalyst, something that people can all gather around. So now that we have that covered, other example of catalysts could be, an acquisition, a merger, a buyout, a share reduction, a split. There could be many, many, many things. So now that we have the catalyst and the fundamentals covered, the next thing I look at is the share structure and specifically the float. So the lower the float, the quicker the stock moves. It is a very, very easy idea to understand. The thing that confuses people a lot is what is considered a low float. Now, technically, I would say 100 million or lower is a low float, but at higher price points, I actually like to go with 50 million and below. This is what I would consider for a penny stock. I need 50 million shares in the float or lower. And the reason why I'm looking for a low float is because the lower the float is, the quicker and easier and higher the price will move. You don't need a lot of volume to move a low float stock, right? And for this reason, the float is a very, very important criteria I look at. So now that we had that covered, we can start looking at the short data. Now there are multiple things people need to be aware of here, but the things that I really focus on is number one, the short interest, and number two, the cost to borrow, and number three, the shares available to borrow. So these three things are very important to me. Other numbers are important as well, but you want to keep it simple. So there's no magical number when it comes to these three indicators that will tell me, oh, this is something that is an excellent squeeze. But it goes to reason, if the short interest is high, 50% or above, then this is a fantastic short squeeze candidate. So now that we have the short information out of the way, let's look at some more fundamental information. So this is not something that ranks very high on my list, but I also like to have a look at it anyway, which is the analyst ratings. Now, usually analysts are very, very off. So analysts are not super important in my opinion. They can be very biased and they're usually very off. It does go to reason that some people who will look at them and will buy according to the recommendations. If the analyst ratings are bad, this doesn't really matter, honestly. If the analyst ratings are good, it matters a little bit. It might get extra people to buy in. It might get extra eyeballs. It can be one of the catalysts that people can rally around. It can show that it's a good fundamental company. But as far as a short squeeze is concerned, it is not the end of the world if an analyst recommendation is to sell. Because then again, most likely, it will not even be shorted if all the analysts aren't already saying that it is something that needs to be sold, right? If the market expectation is this company needs to be sold or is not doing well, then shorts probably would not be on it to begin with. So this is one of the reasons why analyst ratings are not very high on my list. All right, so the next thing here we have is institutional buys. And these can be very, very good, right? Institutions or big money or whatever you want to call them, hedge funds, etc., etc. Now these people, when they're around, it's usually a good thing. It's very good to have these people on your side. When you see these people into a stock, right, this shows me that you have to understand these are not people who will see a show or something on Twitter or stock tweets that's trending and they will jump in. They do a lot of very high level DD, and some of these people actually buy into a certain company, and this is a very complex legal thing, but they buy into company and they are given future or forward looking information, kind of akin to inside information, right? Where of course they are restricted to sell, they have to hold the stock for a long time, but they're given some information that normal folk like us would not know. And this is why they buy into sometimes a higher price. You see this a lot with offerings and things like that, right? So they are told that certain things will happen And in exchange, of course, these people buy at a slightly higher price, but they have this knowledge. So when I see institutions, this is usually a very good sign. And the higher the float is owned by institution, the more likely the stock is to squeeze, because institutions are not selling or freaking out with ups and downs. They usually hold for years, right? And they have very good reasons to hold. So these people are not gonna panic when a short squeeze comes, or when the stock is being shorted, or with the ups and downs. They will hold on. They have experience. They've been in the market for a very long time, right? So these people usually are in it for the long haul, and they're not going anyway. And it's very important for a short squeeze that the float is locked and you don't have a lot of selling, right? Because the less you sell, the better the squeeze is. So, right? So it's good to have the float locked by institutions, right? Now, insider buys and sells. See, this is a very, very important point, right? And it gives us huge, tremendous insight into what management is thinking of. And it goes to reason that if management is buying the stock on the open market, then obviously good things are about to happen. These people are not idiots. They're not going to spend their hard-earned money buying stock of their own company if they think the company is going down the toilet, right? So if we see buys by management, right, very recently before a short squeeze, this is a very good sign. Now you can see people who bought maybe a year ago and they still haven't sold. This is a good point. Fundamentally, it tells me that this is someone maybe who believes in the company long term. But I'm looking at recent inside buys, right? This is what I'm looking for. This is what I want to see. Buys that have happened within the last 3 months. This shows me that something big is on the horizon and it's happening soon. Now, what about insider selling? Of course, it stands to reason that inside selling would be the opposite, but not necessarily. It could be a negative sign, of course, but you have to understand that there are many, many reasons why an insider would sell. And a very recent example that comes to mind is Elon Musk, who had to sell a lot of his Tesla shares to cover his taxes, right? Insiders sell for a variety of reasons. They could have been just given the stock, and they're not people who play with the market. So as soon as the restriction came off, they just sold their stock. Could be a million reasons. Maybe they're buying a house. Maybe one of their kids is going to college. Maybe they're paying some debt. A million reasons for an insider to sell, but only one reason for an insider to buy. So it's not that I would ignore insider selling, but insider buys will give me great confidence. All right, so the final thing that I look at here is technical analysis. Now, I am a huge proponent of technical analysis, and whether you are or not, you have to understand that technical analysis works because everyone believes in it. The second this ceases to be true, it will stop working. Warren Buffett is not wrong to say that technical analysis is hooey, it's astrology for men, etc., etc. But you have to understand, if everyone believes something is going to happen and they take action based on that one thing, then it will happen in the stock market, right? So technical analysis is a very, very important tool. And technical analysis, as I use it for entries and exits, right? Now let's be super honest and super smart about this. A squeeze has nothing to do with fundamentals, and it has nothing to do with technicals either, right? It has to do indirectly with fundamentals, but it definitely does not have to do anything with technicals, right? A stock will not squeeze because there's a cup and handle formation, right? Or reverse head and shoulders. This is not why a stock will squeeze, right? So I don't care about chart patterns or anything when it comes to a stock, right? It's nice to have them, don't get me wrong, but this is not what I'm looking for. What I'm looking for here is supports and resistance. It's very, very important for me to be buying around supports, right? And it's very, very important to me when the stock is running that I see resistance being broken. And this is very, very easy. You don't want to be selling and buying at percentages, right? Some people sell when a stock moved X percentage. It's not wrong per se, but a more accurate and better bang for your money. And if you're always wondering why you leave money on the table, is that you need to put lines on your chart, resistance and supports, right? And you only trim, right? Once you get to resistance, you only trim only once you hit your MAs, your 50 MA or your 200 MA. Only then you only start thinking of trimming, right? Now, technical analysis is very, very, very complicated to be covered in a few minutes. So I'm going to leave this for another video. Probably the next video, if you guys are interested in it, just comment below and I will do a very in-depth video about it. If not, then I will just move on to the next part of the series. But if you guys are interested in that, just let me know in the comments and I will do a very in-depth video on how to use technical analysis for A, entries and exits, and B, and more importantly, is how you can avoid getting your stop loss hit and how to make sure you don't leave any money on the table, because this is very, very important. All right, so now that we have that, the last thing I'll be looking at here is the 52-week range. 52-week range is very, very simple. It means within this year, right, within these 52 weeks, what was the lowest that the price hit and what was the highest that the price hit, right? So ideally and obviously, and it goes to reason, and I'm sure you would agree here, is that I want to be buying as close as I possibly can to the 52-week low, right? And the 52-week high is a very important resistance point for me here. So I might be trimming or even selling at this 52-week high if we get there, right? So this range is very, very important. This is something I look at. I don't want to be buying a stock when it's close to its 52-week high. This kind of tells me that it's either midway through its run or maybe even close to the end of the run. Don't get me wrong, 52 weeks and short squeezes get broken all the time, and it's a very, very important point. But again, when I'm buying, I want to minimize my risk, right? So an ideal scenario, the best scenario in a perfect world, I'd be buying close to the 52-week low. Now, another thing I want to see here is the reason for the 52-week high. And why this is very, very important is because I want to know why the stock hit its 52-week high, right? What was the catalyst? What was the reason for it to hit the 52-week high? And do we have a similar catalyst in our upcoming catalyst? We already covered that. Do we have a similar catalyst, something that is similar to that can help us get there? Because you couple that with the short squeeze and you will have yourself a higher, much, much higher 52-week high. So it's very, very important to me to know why we got the 52-week high to begin with, right? This is something I look at very closely. So that's it. These are the things I look at when I'm analyzing whether a stock is a good short squeeze candidate or not. I am sure everyone has their own different things. I know a lot of people use social media chatter, like, is it trending on StockTwits? Is it trending on Reddit? Is it trending on Twitter? And yeah, I mean, this is how we find the stocks to begin with. You just collect them all, put them in a sheet, and start trending them all against this list and see what sticks, right? This will show you what is a good actual candidate or not, right? This will help you minimize your risk as much as you possibly can. And this answers the final question that we said we'll talk about in this video, is that, is it too late to enter? And of course, once you do all these things, it will be very, very, very clear whether it's too late to enter or not. If the stock has no future catalyst, right? The stock has a mid-sized float, and the short squeeze data is null. There's lots of shares available to borrow. The cost to borrow is acceptable. Short interest has died, right? We're very close to our 52-week high. Then that just shows me that the stock did probably the best it could. It has already squeezed. It's done. It's too late to enter. It might have squeezed. It might have not squeezed, but it did its thing. It did its run, and it's not going anywhere. So as you can see, this list will let you know once you check everything on it. You yourself will be able to tell, right, whether it is too late to enter or not. No longer will you need anyone to tell you what to buy, when to buy, whether it's too late or not. Using this, you can make your own watch lists every day. You can find out whether they're good plays or not. You can make your own entries and exits. You won't need anyone anymore, right? So if you have enjoyed this, if you think this is a good idea for me to show you how you guys can make your own watch lists, find your own things, I can make a lot more videos like that. It'll be about different things. We can cover the OTC, we can cover gappers, there's a lot of things to cover, honestly, when it comes to OTC and penny stocks. So if you guys enjoy this, if you want more quote-unquote trading secrets, I will be happy to oblige. Please let me know in the comments. And please, if you have gained any information from this, even one iota, please just subscribe to the channel. Give me a like, share it around. It means the world to me. It will show me that you guys are interested in this type of content, and I will do more. But till then, this has been your host, Ash, and hope to see you on the next one. Cheers.